Hey everybody, it's Chuck Garfien, and Happy New Year to you. This is the first podcast of 2025. And as we know here in Chicago, January is the coldest month of the year. But here is something that might warm you up. Spring training is only 5 weeks away. Actual baseball will be back in your lives before you know it. And to many of us, we need it. All right, the Garrett Crochet trade brought 4 players back to the White Sox, and our guest today knows 3 of them very well. Emma Tiedemann does play-by-play for the Portland Sea Dogs. That is the Red Sox AA team, and she called tons and tons of games featuring Kyle Teel, Chase Meidroth, and Wickelman Gonzalez. She has great insight to share about all 3 of them, and she herself is a compelling story. One of only a handful of female baseball announcers in the sport. We're going to talk about her rise in the business, how she got to call a Red Sox game at Fenway this past season, and her grandfather is an iconic sportscaster in Texas, Bill Mercer, who once upon a time called the White Sox games with Harry Caray in the mid-1970s. This is a great conversation with Emma Tiedemann on the White Sox new prospects, her sportscasting career, and more. It's coming your way right now. All right, Emma Tiedemann is with me. Emma, thanks for being here. And by the way, I've never been to Maine. Never been to Maine. What am I missing?
You're missing a ton. I mean, we've got lobster, we've got baseball, we've got the beach, we've got mountains, everything. It's the coolest place to be, in my opinion.
I've never heard one person say they went to Maine and had a bad time. They love it there.
Yeah, and some people just stay here. They never leave.
But I think if I go to Maine, it's going to be in the summer or the fall. Would you recommend that as opposed to, say, January?
Definitely. I mean, you could visit in January if you're a fan of the sun setting and it being totally dark by 5 o'clock. If you like darkness, come on up. But definitely, I mean, August is probably the sweet spot where it's hot everywhere else, but it's still relatively cool up here in Portland.
All right. I'm going to make it there one of these days. You know, when the White Sox acquired Kyle Teel, Chase Meidroth, and Wickelman Gonzalez, we're amongst, people covering, following the White Sox, we're trying to figure out, well, who are these guys? What are they like? Well, this is right in your wheelhouse because you were calling games for them as they were in AA or were still in AA last season. So, what was your reaction when you found out that these 3 guys got traded in that deal for Crochet?
I mean, the Red Sox needed a guy like Crochet. So you knew that some prospects were going somewhere. But, it was a little bit of a surprise to see Teel go, quote unquote, with the big 3 and now big 4 with Christian Campbell. You've seen Chase Meidroth's stock really rise over the last couple of seasons, and to have him get noticed by another team, I think speaks volumes to what he can bring to an organization. And then Wickelman Gonzalez, I mean, that's a 40-man guy that the Red Sox were really high on pitching wise. We had seen him in Portland this year, both in the starting rotation and out of the bullpen, kind of showing some versatility there. He was part of a no-hitter for us last season. So a very talented pitcher as well that might have been, in the rotation for the Red Sox in the next couple of seasons, but might be in somebody else's rotation. So I think that you get 3 very talented players that we have seen at the AA level and could really, I think, go pretty far at the big league level if the trajectory stays the same.
Yeah, and the 4th player in the deal was Braden Montgomery, who was drafted in the first round by the Red Sox, didn't play in the minor leagues last season because he got hurt at the end of his Texas A&M season. But what kind of shockwave did that send, if it was a shockwave, in Portland, because you get to know these guys and you expect them, they're all going to end up in Boston, aren't they?
Yeah, I think especially with Kyle Teel, he's such a personable guy and such a unique character, and interacting with him on a day-to-day basis in the clubhouse. It was a guy that you would hope to see at Fenway someday, and that Red Sox fans have really come to enjoy. They've come to enjoy him on the field, and then learning about him off the field really endeared them to him. And, I think it's the same with Chase Meidroth. I think he became pretty popular in Worcester as well. So with the fans in New England, they're very close to the affiliates with Worcester and obviously Portland too. So they get attached and then they get to go see them in Boston, but now they're attached and they're going somewhere else. So it was definitely bittersweet.
So you mentioned Chase Meidroth, drafted in 2022, and he was in AAA last year, had a .437 on base percentage in AAA. In 2023, he played most of the season with the Sea Dogs. What was it like calling his games?
It was great because he is a guy that just busted onto the scene. He was a utility player. We had Nick York at the time at second base, and that was Meidroth's primary position up until that point. We had Blaze Jordan, another prospect who was kind of alternating between first and third. So Meidroth was kind of a guy where, okay, well, we have an opening, Blaze needs the day off or York needs the day off. We'll slot him in. And he forced himself into the lineup every day. He started making these insane defensive plays at third base. There was one, it was a huge hop and he leaps up and he's not a tall guy, but he leapt up, made the catch, spun around and still made the play over at first base. And that's when I knew, I was like, this guy is going to be pretty special. And then at the plate, he just got, it seemed like more patient, and the walks and the on base percentage really speak for themselves in that respect. He just would never swing at anything outside the zone. So some of his at-bats were quite long, which were,
Put the pressure on you, Emma.
Right. Really digging deep for some stories and background. But he was fun to watch because he irritated pitchers. You could really kind of tell that. So if you're a huge baseball fan and you really like that dynamic of pitcher versus hitter, Meidroth provided that drama for us.
Please bring that to Chicago. We don't have that right now. We've got 3 pitches, 4 pitch at bats, things like that, chasing out of the zone. I mean, I'm hoping it's going to improve, with the guys who were here last year because that needs to improve. But bringing a guy like Chase, who I'm guessing you didn't see too much of him last year because he was in AAA. But how do you see his game translating even next season to the major leagues? Because it sounds like he's going to be in competition for a spot on this roster right out of spring training.
Yeah, he's just a gritty guy. And I think we've seen the kind of evolution of the utility player. And I think that's exactly what he can provide. Your second baseman needs a day off. He can fill that role. Your third baseman, is a little shaky he can provide that for you. He's just one of those guys that I think can really electrify a dugout with those types of at-bats. And then you don't really have to worry too much about him defensively. Like you said, I didn't see him a ton at AAA this last season, but the highlight reel plays that we did see were really impressive here at AA. And I wouldn't be surprised to see those, translate to Chicago.
Second base, third base, I think he plays shortstop too. Is there one position that he's best at in your eyes?
Maybe second. But I would say that his arm at third base could be surprising to some people. And the way that he moves so quickly to the ball helps with that as well.
All right. And then you mentioned Kyle Teel. What kind of teammate is he? He seems to be kind of one of these uniters, a glue guy maybe in the clubhouse. How would you describe who he is as a teammate during the season? He's
passionate. And he wants to win every game. You hear all the time how the minor leagues are all about development. But to Kyle Teel, you have to win those games. He's so competitive. So he's the one in the dugout that if it's a close game going into the later innings, he's the one hyping everyone up. Pumping up the team, telling everybody, keep your head in the game. We've only got, 6 more outs kind of thing. So he really is the fire behind a lot of these players. And like you said, he's the glue guy. He has a great relationship with the pitchers, which you can tell pretty quickly. And then, with the hitters, I think motivates them because he wants to go and take swings in the cages. He doesn't want an all-star break because he wants to be playing and swinging. And I think that also motivates a lot of players too, to say, hey, maybe I should be doing that too. To get better. So yeah, all around, he's the fire in the clubhouse.
That's the kind of player that White Sox fans certainly connect with and want on the South Side for sure. Then there's Wickelman Gonzalez, who I didn't see him pitch. I've seen video of him. I looked at his game log from last season. And I mean, there were stretches where he looked like he was absolutely dominating, like was elite, and then he had some struggles here and there. How would you sum up his season, and what could White Sox fans expect from him?
He's a pitcher I've noticed the last couple of years that just gets better as the season goes on. Once I think he really settles into a good routine, not only on the field but off of taking care of his body again, and this is a long season, and I think that once he kind of gets into the groove of things, he can be really, really lights out. His fastball, I think, is the one that people really tend to talk about, and it's incredible. Sits about mid-90s with some run on it. But he had a combined no-hitter here in Portland in 2023. And honestly, it was his curveball. That thing was nasty. And I think by about the third inning, that's when I realized that this was going to be something special. And it was just because of that pitch. And you could just tell the way he was coming off the mound, the way that ball was diving, and there were so many swings and misses. I think that if he can put that all together, he can be another elite arm, either in the starting rotation or probably out of the bullpen, and just kind of provide some long relief at times, multiple inning reliever. But that fastball, even his changeup is great too, but the fastball curveball combo, in my opinion, can be lethal.
And what were you hearing about Braden Montgomery? I know you didn't call him in his games, but he had to be on your radar, and you're probably thinking, well, he's going to be here eventually, maybe next season.
Yeah, with the way that the Red Sox moved Kyle Teel up so quickly, actually, we were here thinking maybe we could see him by the end of the season, even if it's for, just a series or two. But yeah, obviously a great draft pick by the Red Sox in a position that they needed a little bit more depth with. I don't know a ton about him because he wasn't on our team quite yet. But it was really interesting to see that they traded first, him and Teel for Crochet and to kind of give up that extra prospect that wasn't really on anyone's radar. Everyone thought that it would be, maybe a Teel, Roman Anthony-esque kind of package, but Braden Montgomery wasn't really talked about, and now he's with the White Sox.
All right, I want to talk about your career. If you enter the sportscasting field like you did, like I did, the journey is never a straight line. There are twists and turns. You have no idea where you're going to end up sometimes. You got to start somewhere. Can you can you share where your first play-by-play job was? I admire you for doing what you did to get into the business.
First play-by-play ever was when I was 15 years old at the University of Texas at Dallas. I grew up in Dallas, and
by the way, I didn't know this. Okay, so you're going further. All right, I thought you were going to go somewhere else. But go ahead.
Are you going baseball?
You know what? That's a good point. So I was going baseball, but I don't know what you're going to say right now. So go ahead. 15 years old.
Yeah. So I was at the time keeping score for my grandfather, who is was a broadcaster. And he had an extra headset at the time and said, "Hey, you've been playing basketball for your whole life. Why don't you put on the headset and, try and call this game with me and see how this goes?" And I said, "Why not?" And called the game with him and fell in love with play-by-play and just continued to do it ever since I was 15.
Yeah, so your grandfather is Bill Mercer, who I want to talk to you about in a bit, but your first play-by-play job, baseball play-by-play job. I mean, I was in a small town in Colorado to get started, Aspen, not a bad place to start, although I was broadcasting for free.
Relatable.
For free, and did other jobs to pay the bills. And then I got a job in Traverse City, Michigan. That was my first official job. And I noticed that you went to a very small, I should say small town. The suspense is probably like, everyone's like, where are you talking about, Chuck? All right, where were you? You were in Alaska. Tell us about how you got this job in Alaska.
Yeah, so I was in college and needing an internship, aka to work for free somewhere, and I knew that baseball was my weakest sport play-by-play wise, so I reached out to every summer collegiate GM in the country, and 2 responded. one of which was in Palmer, Alaska, which is a very small town just outside of Anchorage. And he offered me the job and said, we can't pay you, but we can fly you up here. We can give you a host family and we'll give you a minivan to drive around for the summer. And I thought, well, I don't have any other options, but also I've never been to Alaska, so why not? So I spent the summer in Alaska, traveling with the team, driving a minivan, working for free and having the time of my life. And that's what hooked me for working in baseball. I had always loved the sport, obviously, but being able to work every single day, travel around the country and see teams blossom and develop and everything, it would just absolutely had me hooked. So I've been doing that ever since.
Now, were you the only voice? Was there an analyst or was it just you?
I did have a partner.
Okay.
Yep. So there were two of us. And while the person was doing color, that person was also keeping score, was the official scorer at home. And then whenever we switched with play-by-play and stuff, then I would be the official scorer. And yeah, lots of hats were worn last season.
And I was actually surprised because that league has seen some amazing players go through it. Is this true? Barry Bonds, Aaron Boone, Paul Goldschmidt, Aaron Judge, Randy Johnson. Is this the same league that you were calling? I had no idea they all played up in Alaska.
Yeah, and I think the majority of them probably played for the Alaska Gold Planters in Fairbanks. I mean, I had Nick Senzel on my team. I think by the end of that kind of group, I think 4 or 5 of them were actually drafted. So you actually have really loaded teams up in Alaska. And I had no idea. And now I like to share that little tidbit of go visit Alaska and watch some baseball.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing experience, life experience, right? Nothing against what you came later, but you went to the Medford Rogues. You called baseball for them. St. Paul Saints, the Lexington Legends, Morehead State basketball. What is it about play-by-play and specifically baseball play-by-play that you love and keeps you just so engaged and passionate about calling games for a living?
I mean, I think it's that you never know what's going to happen day to day, and you can prep and research, which we all should and do every single day, to be prepared for anything, but you never know what anything is going to be. And you could prep for, the pitcher, is going to be a great guy on the mound, and he gets lit up and is gone with 2 outs in the first inning, and all of your prep work just goes to the trash can and you have to pivot. I just absolutely love that aspect of the actual broadcast side. And then I just love the sport. It's such a beautiful thing. It could be a 11-run game, but it keeps you on your toes at times. And there's always fun things to watch, no matter what's going on, no matter the score. And I just like to kind of convey that in every broadcast and keep my energy high because I just love it.
Yeah, it's in your blood, and that's how I feel. And even though the White Sox went through the worst season in modern baseball history, one of these days, I don't want to say that anymore, but I keep having to say that, unfortunately. But every day, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen today. Maybe they'll win the game. Maybe this will happen. Maybe the unknown will occur. And that's what I love about the game as well. And so I think we are speaking the same language. So 2020, you got a job with the Portland Sea Dogs. That sounds like pandemic baseball, if that's when you got started. What was that like?
It wasn't ideal. I drove up here from Lexington and I left my then boyfriend, now husband, behind in Kentucky. And I said, I'll see you in a few months. But I'm going to Portland, Maine. And as I was driving up, I was listening to some sports talk radio, probably outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And they were talking about how the NBA just stopped one of their games mid-game. And it didn't really click to me that I'm going to a job in sports and I should probably be more concerned than I was. But I was just trying to get to Portland and started my first day. We had an all-staff meeting and our GM said, this is Emma. She's our new broadcaster. But also we've been talking with the CDC and it looks like we're going to all pack up our stuff and go home to work remotely for the time being. So I never fully unpacked. I just got my new work computer and went home to my apartment that was an air mattress and cardboard boxes. And we worked from home for 3 months, came back to the ballpark. By that time, our season had been canceled. And so we found projects around the ballpark. We grinded handrails and painted and did little projects here and there, just trying to get by and get through just to get us to 2021.
Wow, that's amazing. You cover prospects. Do you feel like a prospect, a sportscasting prospect trying to make your way to the big leagues?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the dream, right? The dream for me is to be a radio voice of a major league team one day. And I think that, I'm working towards something every single day. I'm doing things to get better. And yes, that's the overarching goal. But honestly, my day-to-day goals is just to have a fun, informative broadcast that describes what's going on the field. So I try not to look at that huge goal that I may attain, I may never attain. I may be in Portland for the next 30 years and still be here. But just trying to put on a great broadcast every night that people look forward to listening to, and they hopefully don't mute too often.
Okay. Well, in 2023, you had a new partner. You were teamed with Riley Pay, and you guys became, if I'm not mistaken, the second all-female booth in baseball history. Is that true?
Yes, actually, it is technically true.
So what is that like? I mean, that's some kind of designation. I mean, you're making history when you literally go to work every day. So what is that? What has that experience been like for you?
Kind of daunting, that's one thing that I don't particularly like talking about. It's brought up so much, and I was the first female broadcaster in Alaska, the first in Oregon, this has just kind of followed me. So it's kind of nice to be the second, but,
that's progress.
Right. But no, I think it was a huge honor and something that I think brought more awareness to the fact that there are not a lot of women in these roles. The fact that we were just the second and it was 2023 already. We're like, come on, people. Like, why is it taking this long? But it was awesome to have Riley in the booth in 2023. And that position as my assistant is to really grow and develop as a broadcaster and as somebody in minor league baseball, because we don't just broadcast, we do the media relations, we do a lot of the roster moves and all that sort of thing, and learning the ins and outs. And Riley really blossomed into an excellent broadcaster, a great teammate. And I think we had a lot of fun on the air together. And I think people really resonated with that and had fun with us.
So last August, you get the call to Fenway. You and Riley called a game with Dave O'Brien and Kevin Youkilis with the Red Sox. I think there were 3 innings in there where it was just you two calling the game. I know you've been asked this question a lot, but I got to get your reaction. What was that experience like for you?
I mean, it was surreal. It was something that, you work your whole life for, and something that you think is sometimes never going to happen. You get into this grind and you think, I've been at this level, or I've been doing this for so long. When is it ever going to pay off? And to kind of have that moment and to especially share it with Riley too, and to be with someone I'm so familiar with, made it even more special. And to be able to look at her and be like, okay, this is just a baseball game. That's what our coaching staff told us the whole week leading up to it. They said, don't be nervous. It's just baseball. And,
wait, your coaching staff was telling you that?
Oh yeah. Cause they were all, and I point over here like they're here, but they were, hyping us up all week and telling us like, oh, you do this every day. It's no different. Yeah. But it was surreal. I still have to pinch myself that it actually happened, because it's one of the coolest experiences in the world and one I'll never forget.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Have you listened to the broadcast, or are you kind of like, no, I don't even want to listen to it. I just want to experience it, how it happened, and that'll be it. Yeah,
actually, it's funny. At like 3 a.m. this morning, I thought, I think this week I'm going to listen to it because I haven't yet. And so I don't know why. It was just one of those 3 a.m. thoughts. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to work up the courage. I'm going to watch it back.
Do you listen to your regular broadcasts? I mean, how much do you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. I think that we can be our own worst critics. So I think that I critique myself a lot harder than anybody else would that I send my tape out to. But I'll typically find a random inning from the night before, and I'll listen to that while I'm doing my game notes, or I'll listen on the bus during our many wonderful bus trips around the Eastern League. But yeah, I think you have to listen back and you have to critique yourself, and then you have to get outside critiques as well, of course. But yes, during the season, I will listen a lot more regularly than I did my one major league game.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I don't watch every show, but I'm very critical of myself, and I'm always trying to get better, And it sounds like you have that in you as well. Your mentors, Well, your number one mentor is your grandfather, Bill. And so for everyone who doesn't know Bill Mercer, he was a sportscaster for over 60 years. He was the first radio voice of the Texas Rangers, called Cowboys games, and he called White Sox games with Harry Caray in 1974 and 1975. What is your grandfather like, and what does he think about you following in his footsteps?
I mean, he turns 99 next month, and if he could, he would go call a game. And you call him the day after the World Series is over, and he almost won't speak to you. He's so just upset about the fact that baseball is over. He goes, we got to wait till February until the, pitchers and catchers, he is a baseball lifer.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that he instilled in me of loving the game and loving broadcasting. But, I think that this whole career, obviously I owe to him. And specifically with baseball, I mean, when I was in Alaska, I was very rough play-by-play wise, and he would stay up. He was living in North Carolina at the time. He would stay up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning listening because of the time change differences. He would stay up, and I would have long emails. And I actually just found a journal that he also would write in of handwritten notes of critiques of the game that night. And so I would have these long emails in the morning. I'd go over them, and then I would have to choose like 1 or 2 things to work on for that next game. And then I've carried that over to just picking one thing to work on every game, get better at that, and I can move on to the next. So he still does that, by the way. The emails luckily have gotten shorter with his critiques, but he still listens to every single baseball game, every single basketball game I do. We talk about it after, talk about what I could have done better, talk about the team, how they're doing. But yeah, he's just still up and paying attention to baseball, watches as much as he can. And he's great.
What a degree you received, not necessarily in a regular college, but you went to Bill Mercer University, and he provided so much wisdom, has provided so much wisdom for you to get that kind of critique in the beginning. What did that mean for you? Because I wasn't getting that. I was figuring out for myself and realizing, boy, my voice sucks. I didn't read that highlight well. I got to figure this out. I know what I need to sound like, and I don't sound good. But to get that kind of stuff, that kind of wisdom, that's it is incredible. So, what was it like to get that? How much do you appreciate it?
So much now, especially whenever I'm giving feedback to up and coming broadcasters. I think that and he was really great about not only talking about the fundamentals of broadcasting and, all right, we're going to use present tense. This is, try and get this vocabulary word out of your usage and all this kind of stuff. But it was also, this is how you breathe. And this is where you need to breathe from to get this out. And
the diaphragm?
The diaphragm, yes. And you feel it expand, and you sit up, what I'm not doing right now, sit up tall with your shoulders rolled back, and all of that kind of, those little details that I wouldn't have probably gotten until my 20s at least, but I got when I was 15 years old and doing my first week of play-by-play.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you learned your craft from your grandfather, and there was also a broadcaster that I read that he had you listen to, and I'm stunned. I'm stunned that you would listen to Red Barber broadcasts. So Red Barber, a legendary, iconic voice of the Yankees and the Red Sox. Sorry, Yankees and the what am I saying? Brooklyn Dodgers, excuse me. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s. What compelled you to not only start listening to Red Barber, but be so taken by him and want to follow his style?
Well, it's funny. My grandfather, when he was a professor at the University of North Texas, he actually had his students read one of Red Barber's books, The Broadcasters. And he used that as his quote unquote textbook. And it was really just the final chapter on preparation for games. And so I, of course, read it, and I was like, well, might as well read the whole book. And so I read the whole book, and it's just great. The way he breaks his, preparation down of, you need to read the newspaper so you know what's going on in the world and not just what's going on the field. And those little things got me interested to listen to the guy. And then realizing that, what they did in that era, it was only radio. There was no TV. So people were sitting, listening on their couches to what Red Barber was talking about. So you had to describe everything. You had to hammer home those details and build up the big moments, but then don't undercut the small moments either of what's going on. And so I think that's what really drew me to it. And so when you listen to my broadcast, I'm not Red Barber, but you will be able to know the count. You'll know the score. You'll know the situation. That's one thing my grandfather's really big on. You have to talk about runners on base. All those little details you'll get with just about every pitch, because you never know who's going to be tuning in, when they're going to tune in. And if it was at that moment that they started paying attention to the broadcast. So it was those little details that made me more aware of what I was saying on the broadcast as well.
Yeah. What I noticed is radio broadcasts, especially, it's like a song, a long song, 3-hour song. It's like an orchestra, right? I mean, there's just a lot of instruments, and you are the instrument, and you have to find all sorts of ways to keep people listening. You can't talk with this monotone voice. You got to go up and down, use your voice in different ways. And that being said, how are you improving as a play-by-play announcer year after year after year? And what are you working on?
I mean, my voice was a big part of it, because, I didn't want to be too pitchy. I didn't want to have someone tune in and say, oh my gosh, that woman, she's losing her mind. I wanted to kind of keep my base, while also being able to learn to, it's kind of hard to explain if you don't want to start yelling and you want to keep the richness of your voice as well, which again goes back to the diaphragm and the way that you're able to breathe. So I think right now what I'm working on is just delivering a major league caliber broadcast every single game. I think that it helps me, it helps the listeners, and it also will help my assistant in the future of showing, this is the level of professionalism that the Sea Dogs and Red Sox affiliates expect. And this is how we're going to run our booth. So I think that's what I'm really focused on, and just making sure I don't miss those small details of, I can't forget the score. I can't forget to, occasionally drop in what the uniforms look like. And obviously the minor leagues provide some unique jerseys to talk about and some fun talking points with that.
Well, one thing that I benefited from, and I could have used a little more of this, was working in small markets. That's where you really can hone your craft and as little of an audience as possible. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't ready, even though I felt like I was ready to get to Chicago at an earlier age. I'm so glad I wasn't, because I wasn't ready, even though I felt like I was ready. It's good to get the seasoning down there, and you have so many games, so many games. It's incredible batting practice for you to improve as a broadcaster. And I've heard some of your calls, and I think you're 100% on the right track for sure.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, if I don't get better in 138 games a year, we've got a problem.
And one last thing on your grandfather. He's fascinating. He covered the JFK assassination, and he was the first reporter to inform Lee Harvey Oswald that he would be charged with murder. I'm sorry to have this conversation come to a screeching halt, but your grandfather is like a Forrest Gump figure, in where he was just in some incredible life-changing, country-altering situations. Does he ever talk about that? Oh,
absolutely. I can tell you that whole story about Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah, I mean, he wrote a book about it. It's called When the News Went Live. And I mean, he just, all of that kind of based on relationships he had with the Dallas Police Department. And, in that instance, one of the officers he knew at the time knew that they were going to indict him on murder charges and assassination of the president. And they were going into that press conference, and he was the one to be able to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. And he talks about how Lee Harvey Oswald locked eyes with him at that moment, because he got his attention and told him that news. So yeah, my grandfather's one of those people where you sit and you look around his apartment he lives in right now, and you look at the Kennedy assassination stuff, and then you realize, oh, he was with the White Sox, he was with the Cowboys, and then he also called world-class championship wrestling. Like, what has this man not done?
Does he have any Harry Caray stories to share?
Yeah, I mean, he just talks about Harry's energy and how he was probably one of the more unique partners that he ever broadcasted with, because he was with Don Drysdale. And, going from Don to Harry was different, I would say.
Yes. Yeah, I would say Harry Caray was a unicorn, very unique person and personality, and an icon here in Chicago and actually the country, much like your grandfather. Emma, this is great talking with you and learning a lot about the Red Sox prospects and learning a lot about you. And I'm really excited about your career going forward and where it ends up. But in the meantime, Portland's got a great one, and it's been great to have you here on the podcast to enlighten us on hopefully what will lead to a division championship for the White Sox and beyond going forward, because the White Sox need to get better soon, and these three guys might be some big pieces for them for their future. So, Emma, thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, and that's a wrap for this edition of the White Sox podcast. Former Red Sox legend Hawk Harrelson, take it away.
All right, Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.